Today, I bring you a narrative that will challenge everything you know about God and spirituality. In this video, we will explore the incredible experience of Raul Sanabria, who, after surviving a near-fatal accident, discovered truths about God that religion never revealed to him. Prepare yourself for a journey of deep and surprising revelations. If you appreciate stories that provoke reflection and offer a new perspective on the world, go ahead and give it a like. Subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss any content. Now, let's get to know Raul's story and what he discovered about the true divine essence. Hello, I am Raul Sanabria. Until a few months ago, I was just another business consultant in Houston, Texas. I was born and raised in San Juan, Puerto Rico, but moved to the United States in search of a promising career. My father, Santiago, was always an example of strength and determination for me, and I wanted to honor his memory by being successful. Life in Houston was a constant rush, with meetings, goals, and clients to satisfy, and I lived at high speed. I was so focused on reaching the top that, without realizing it, I drifted away from the things that truly mattered. My spirituality and family took a back seat. I grew up in a very religious household. My father was a deeply devout man, with an unshakable belief in a just but punitive God, always ready to punish any slip. This view shaped my childhood and, over time, distanced me from faith. I could never reconcile this severe image with the idea of a loving and compassionate God. As the years passed, my faith became a distant memory, buried under layers of pragmatism and rationality. I became skeptical, focused only on the material world and the results I could see and measure. But all that changed in a single instant. A moment that began like any other but ended with the greatest twist of my life. Today I want to share with you the story of how an accident nearly took my life and how, during this brief encounter with the other side, I discovered truths about God, life, and spirituality that changed my existence forever. I am not a man of half words or beating around the bush. I will tell you exactly how it happened, in the most honest and direct way possible. It may seem unbelievable at times, but I ask you to listen with an open mind. What I experienced that day completely changed my perspective on life and death, and I hope my story can touch you in some way. It was a typical morning in Houston. The sun shone brightly in the cloudless sky, and the Texas heat was already starting to make itself felt, even though it was still early. I had just left an important meeting and decided to walk to my favorite cafe for a quick break before the next appointment. As I walked along the busy sidewalk, my phone rang. It was an important client, one you can't ignore. I answered immediately and focused on the conversation, almost forgetting the world around me. It was in this moment of distraction that everything happened. Suddenly, I heard a deafening noise above me. It was as if something heavy was falling. I instinctively looked up and, at the last second, saw a huge wooden plank plummeting toward me. I had no time to react. It happened so quickly that my brain barely processed what was happening. The impact was direct on my head. The pain. My God! The pain was unbearable. It was as if a lightning bolt had struck through my skull. I felt my vision darken, and my legs give way. I fell onto the hard sidewalk, my phone slipping from my hand and shattering a few meters away. The people around me began to scream and stir. I heard distant voices calling for an ambulance and others asking if I was okay, but I could barely hear them. The world around me seemed to be dissolving, as if I were sinking into a dark, deep sea. As I struggled to maintain consciousness, something strange began to happen. An intense blue light started to invade my peripheral vision. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was a different light, one that didn't hurt the eyes. On the contrary, it seemed to emanate a comforting warmth, bringing with it a sense of peace that strongly contrasted with the pain I was feeling. It was at that moment that I realized something much greater was happening, something beyond my comprehension. The blue light grew stronger and more intense, filling my entire field of vision. The pain began to subside, as if it were being washed away by that mysterious light. I remember thinking, Is this the end? Is this how it all ends? Curiously, I didn't feel fear. On the contrary, an unexpected calm took over me, almost as if I were about to embark on an incredible journey. And then, everything went dark, but this darkness didn't last long. Soon, the blue light I had seen before returned, more intense than ever. It was as if it were filling every cell of my body, enveloping me completely. The pain I felt moments before disappeared entirely, replaced by a sensation of warmth and comfort that I had never experienced. As the light intensified, I felt something strange, as if my body were dissolving. It wasn't frightening. On the contrary, it felt like I was being freed from a weight I didn't even know I was carrying. I felt light, almost ethereal. Suddenly, I realized I was floating, as if an invisible and benevolent force were lifting me. There was no fear, no panic, just a deep sense of peace and curiosity about what would come next. It was then that I heard a voice. It was soft, almost a whisper, but at the same time clear and comforting. "It's okay," said the voice. "I will take you to a safe place." There was something in that voice, a kindness and understanding that made me trust instantly. All the anxiety and fear I might have felt began to fade away. As I floated, guided by this invisible presence, I began to see the world around me in a completely new way. The streets of Houston were below, but they seemed distant, almost unrecognizable, as if I were observing an elaborate model. The people, the cars, the buildings, everything seemed so small and insignificant from that perspective. As I rose higher and higher, the city transformed into just a point of light in the vastness of a new dimension that opened before me. Time and space, as I knew them, seemed to have no meaning anymore. It was as if I were entering a realm where the laws of physics no longer applied. The sensation was indescribable. I felt completely free, liberated from all the worries and fears I carried in earthly life. For the first time in a long time, perhaps for the first time in my life, I felt truly at peace. As I advanced on this surreal journey, I began to realize that I was being taken to a specific place. I didn't know what awaited me, but I felt deep down that it would be something extraordinary, something that would change everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the universe. As the city of Houston completely disappeared from my view, I found myself entering a dimension beyond any human comprehension. It was a place of indescribable beauty, so vast and majestic that it left me breathless, although I wasn't really breathing at that moment. Around me, planets and stars shone with an intensity and beauty I had never seen before. The colors were more vivid than anything I had experienced on Earth. Blues deeper than the purest ocean, reds more intense than the most dramatic sunset, and colors I didn't even know existed. Each star, each planet seemed to pulse with its own life. The most impressive thing was the deep sense of peace that permeated everything around me. It was as if love and harmony were the primary forces governing that place. There was no fear, no anxiety, just a sense of belonging and total acceptance. Suddenly, I saw a staircase in front of me. But it wasn't an ordinary staircase. It seemed to be made of a substance that was both solid and ethereal. The steps glowed softly, as if made of crystallized light. Each step seemed to invite me to climb, promising to reveal more wonders. I began to climb the staircase, and with each step I felt lighter. It was as if each step was purifying me, removing layers of worries and fears I didn't even know I carried. A fresh, floral aroma filled the air, vaguely reminding me of the gardens of my childhood in Puerto Rico, but 1,000 times more intense and comforting. At the top of the staircase I found a white stone bridge. The stone seemed almost translucent, emitting a soft and welcoming light. On each side of the bridge, vibrant colored flowers bloomed, emanating their own light that danced in the air. Below the bridge, crystal clear water flowed gently, producing a sound that was like celestial music. As I crossed the bridge, I felt a peace that cannot be described with human words. It was as if each step was bringing me closer to something or someone I knew, deep in my being. I was about to experience something that would transform my life forever. On the other side of the bridge, an intense light awaited me. It was so strong that it should have blinded me, but somehow I could look directly at it without feeling discomfort. The light seemed to call me, and I felt drawn to approach. As I got closer, I began to perceive shapes within the light. They were silhouettes that seemed familiar, although I couldn't identify them immediately. My heart raced, or at least that was the sensation I had. I was about to meet someone or something that I knew would change everything. As I approached the bright light, the silhouettes began to take shape. My heart, or whatever it was in that state, leaked when I recognized the figures. They were my deceased relatives, people I hadn't seen in years, some I hadn't even met in life. The first person I recognized was my father, Santiago. He was exactly as I remembered, but at the same time different. His eyes shone with a wisdom and kindness that went beyond what I knew. He smiled at me, a smile full of love and acceptance that warmed my entire being. Beside him I saw my paternal grandmother, who had passed away when I was a child. She looked much younger than in the photos I had seen, with a soft and radiant face. There were other familiar faces, uncles, cousins, friends who left too soon. They all smiled at me, their eyes full of love and understanding. Without hesitation, I ran toward my father. It was as if all the distance that death had placed between us had disappeared in an instant. When I embraced him, I felt a joy I hadn't experienced since he had left. It was an embrace that transcended the physical, as if our souls were uniting. "My son," he said, his voice exactly as I remembered, but somehow clearer, purer. "I am so proud of you." Those words hit me like a wave. How many times had I wished to hear them? How many nights had I spent wondering if I was honoring his memory, if I was living as he expected? "Dad," I began, my voice choked with emotion. "I miss you so much. I have so many things to tell you, so many questions." He smiled, placing his hand on my shoulder. "I know, son. I know everything, and I want you to know that I have always been with you, even when you couldn't see or feel me." My grandmother approached, her gentle smile filling me with a peace I had never experienced. "My dear," she said, "you have grown so much. We are all so proud of you." I looked around at all the smiling faces. It was like a family reunion, but much deeper and more meaningful than any I had ever experienced on Earth. There was no judgment, no resentments or old hurts, just pure and unconditional love. My father, however, had a serious look when he spoke again. "Raul, my son, you need to know that it is not your time to stay here with us." I felt a pang in my chest. "What do you mean, it's not my time?" I was so happy there, so at peace. How could I go back? "You still have a mission to fulfill on Earth," my father continued. "There are people who need you, important things you need to do." I looked at the faces around me, all nodding in agreement. My grandmother approached again, her soft touch on my arm conveying comfort. "Don't worry, dear," she said. "We will always be here waiting for you. But now, you need to go back and live the life you were given." I wanted to protest, wanted to stay there with them in that place of peace and love. But something inside me knew they were right. There was something unfinished, something important I needed to do. "Remember, son," my father said, his eyes shining with wisdom. "The love we feel for you knows no limits of time or space. We will always be with you, guiding your steps." With one last collective embrace, I felt it was time to leave. But before I moved away, my father held my hand one last time. "There are more things you need to see and understand before you return," he said. "Be open, son. What you are about to experience will change your life forever." With my heart full of love and my eyes brimming with tears, I moved away from them. As their figures disappeared into the light, I felt a new presence approaching. It was something different, something even more powerful and majestic than everything I had experienced until then. As I moved away from my loved ones, I felt a change. Around me, the environment seemed flooded with a light that, although already intense, became even brighter. However, this brightness was not blinding or uncomfortable. It was as if every particle of my being was being enveloped by pure and loving energy. Suddenly, I realized I was in the presence of something, although there was no defined form I could describe in human terms. It was more an overwhelming sensation of being before an immensely great and powerful entity. At that moment I knew, with a certainty that transcended any logic, that I was before God. But it was not the God I had imagined throughout my life, nor the severe and punitive God my father, Santiago, had taught me to fear. This presence was pure love. It was as if all the love in the universe was concentrated in a single point, radiating infinite acceptance, compassion, and understanding. There was no judgment, no condemnation. Just a love so deep and unconditional that it made me fall to my knees. Or at least, that was the sensation I had in that non-physical state. Tears streamed down my face as I realized how mistaken I had been throughout my life. All the times I turned away from spirituality, all the times I doubted or questioned the existence of a higher power, all that seemed so insignificant now. It was then that I heard a voice. It was not a conventional voice. It was as if the very molecules of the air, if there was air in that place, vibrated with a message directed straight to my soul. "My child," said the voice. And the love contained in those two words was more than I could bear. "You have walked for so long with your eyes closed, but now it is time to see the truth." I wanted to speak, wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but I felt incapable of forming words. It wasn't necessary. The divine presence seemed to understand every thought, every emotion that passed through me. "What you knew as God on earth is just a pale reflection of the truth." The voice continued. "Humans, in their limited understanding, have created a distorted image. I am not a severe judge, nor a distant king on a throne. I am the love that permeates all creation." These words resonated in me with incredible force. It was as if every cell of my being was being reconfigured to understand this fundamental truth. "You do not need to fear." The voice continued. "There is no eternal punishment. There is no condemnation. There is only love, learning, and growth. Every soul in its time finds its way back home." I felt overwhelmed. My entire belief system, everything I thought I knew about God and spirituality, was being completely transformed. It was both frightening and liberating at the same time. But then, I finally managed to form a coherent thought. Why is there so much suffering in the world? Why do bad things happen if God is love? The answer came not in words, but in a deep understanding that spread throughout my being. I saw that suffering was not a punishment, but an opportunity for growth. That the difficulties of life were like resistances in an exercise, strengthening the soul. And that, in the end, all suffering would be transformed into understanding and love. I stayed there, immersed in this divine presence, absorbing truths that went beyond my capacity for expression in human words. I felt I could stay there forever, learning and growing in this infinite love. But then, gently, I felt I was being guided away. There were more things I needed to see and understand before returning. And so, reluctantly, I moved away from the divine presence, knowing that nothing would be the same after this encounter. As I moved away from the divine presence, still trying to process everything I had experienced, I noticed a new figure approaching. It was different from my relatives I had encountered before, and different also from the overwhelming presence of God. This figure had a more defined form, more human. As the figure approached, I was overwhelmed by a deep sense of recognition. It wasn't a visual recognition after all. I had never seen this person before. It was more as if my soul recognized him instantly. It was Jesus Christ. But he was nothing like the images I had seen in churches or religious books. There was no crown of thorns, no elaborate robes. What I saw was a simple man, dressed in modest clothes, but emanating a light and love that were almost tangible. His eyes, my God, his eyes were a deep brown, full of compassion and understanding that left me speechless. When he smiled at me, I felt as if it was as if the universe was sharing a smile. "Raoul," he spoke. His voice was simultaneously gentle and powerful. "Do not fear. I am here to help you understand." I felt like kneeling to prostrate myself before him, but Jesus gently placed his hand on my shoulder, stopping me. "It is not necessary," he said. "Here, we are all equal. We are all children of the same Father." He began to walk, and I followed him without hesitation. As we walked, the scenery around us constantly changed. I saw towering mountains, endless oceans, lush forests, all pulsing with a life and beauty beyond human comprehension. "You met the Father," Jesus commented, referring to my previous encounter with God. "Now you realize that he is not the vengeful and punitive being that many on earth believe him to be?" I nodded, still unable to find words. "My message on earth has been distorted over the centuries," he continued. "I came to teach about love, forgiveness, and compassion. to show that the kingdom of heaven is within each one. But men, in their limitation, transformed these simple truths into complicated dogmas and rigid rules. As he spoke, I saw flashes of Earth's history, saw how Jesus' simple words were interpreted and reinterpreted. How wars in his name, how fear was used to control people. But I also saw how, despite all this, the love he taught continued to touch hearts and transform lives. Raul, Jesus said, stopping and looking directly into my eyes. You have a choice to make now. My heart leaped. A choice? You can stay here in this place of peace and love, he said. Or you can return to Earth, carrying with you what you learned here. I remained silent for a moment, pondering his words. To remain there, in that place of infinite love and peace. It was tempting. Very tempting. But something inside me knew it wasn't my time yet. Before you decide, Jesus said, let me show you something. He reached out and touched my forehead. Suddenly, I was flooded with visions of the future. The visions Jesus showed me were so vivid, so real that it was as if I were actually there, living those moments. The first thing I saw was my mother, Isabel. My heart tightened at the sight of her. She was sitting alone in a rocking chair, looking out the window of our house in Puerto Rico. Her hair, once black as night, was now completely white. Her hands, which I remembered always active, doing something, now trembled slightly in her lap. But what shocked me most were her eyes. Those eyes that always shone with joy now seemed dull, filled with deep sadness. I saw how she spent her days, alone in that house too big for one person. I saw how she looked at the photos on the wall. Photos of our family, of me as a child, of my father, and how silent tears ran down her wrinkled face. Mom. I wanted to shout, but I had no voice in that vision. I wanted to hug her, to tell her everything was okay, that I loved her, but I couldn't. The scene changed. And now I saw my son, Miguel, my little boy, whom I left behind so many times while chasing professional success. He was no longer a boy. He was a young man, facing challenges I couldn't even imagine. I saw Miguel struggling at school, being bullied by other boys. I saw the pain in his eyes when he looked at the empty chair at the dinner table, where I should have been sitting. I saw him making difficult decisions, without a father to guide or advise him. One scene in particular broke my heart. Miguel, now a teenager, was sitting in his room, looking at a photo of me. Why did you have to go, Dad? He murmured, his voice choked with emotion. I need you. The visions continued, showing me other members of my family, friends, co-workers. I saw how my absence affected each of them in different ways. I saw missed opportunities for love, for connection, for making a difference in people's lives. But they weren't just visions of sadness and loss. Jesus also showed me moments of joy and triumph that I could experience if I returned. I saw myself hugging my mother, her face lit up with happiness. I saw myself teaching Miguel to drive, laughing together at his awkward first attempts. I saw myself making a difference in people's lives, using my experience and knowledge to help others. When the visions ended, I was emotionally exhausted. I looked at Jesus, his features full of compassion and understanding. Now you understand? He said softly. Your journey on earth is not over yet. There is much you can still do, many lives you can touch. I felt unable to articulate any words. The realization of the impact my absence would cause and the good I could still do by returning was overwhelming. But remember, Jesus continued, if you decide to go back, it will not be easy. There will be challenges, pains, and moments of doubt. You will carry the weight of the knowledge acquired here, knowing that not everyone will understand or believe in your experience. I took a deep breath, or at least I felt as if I did in that non-physical state. The decision was now clear to me. I knew what I needed to do. I want to go back, I declared firmly, despite the emotion. I need to go back. For my mother. For my son. For all those I can help. Jesus smiled. A smile full of love and approval. You have made a courageous choice, Raul, and know that regardless of what happens, you will never be alone. We will always be with you, guiding your steps. With those words, he placed his hand on my shoulder, and I felt a wave of strength and courage fill me. I was ready to return and face whatever the future held for me. The moment I decided to return, I felt an immediate change in the environment around me. The bright and welcoming light of the other world began to dissipate, giving way to a darkness that was not frightening, but comforting, like a blanket enveloping my consciousness. Jesus smiled at me one last time, his eyes full of love and understanding. "Remember, Raul," he said, his voice echoing as his image began to fade. "The love you experienced here is always with you. Carry it in your heart and share it with the world." I felt as if I were falling, but there was no fear. It was more like I was being gently guided back to my body, like a feather floating softly in the air. As I descended, I began to feel physical sensations again. First, a tingling in the tips of my fingers and toes. Then, a pressure on my chest, as if someone were rhythmically pushing. Sounds began to penetrate through the darkness. Muffled voices, beeping machines, the characteristic sound of a hospital. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my head, reminding me of the accident that led me to this incredible journey. The pain was intense, but somehow, I welcomed it like an old friend. It was a reminder that I was alive, that I had managed to return. Slowly, with an effort that seemed Herculean, I opened my eyes. The bright light of the operating room blinded me momentarily, and I blinked several times to adjust my vision. Worried faces of doctors and nurses appeared in my field of vision, their expressions changing from tension to relief as they realized I was conscious. "He's back," I heard someone exclaim. "It's a miracle." I wanted to speak, to tell them about what I had experienced, but my throat was dry and sore. All I managed was a weak groan. A nurse leaned over me, her gentle eyes examining me carefully. "Mr. Sanabria, can you hear me? Blink twice if you can understand me." I concentrated all my strength and blinked twice. I saw relief spread across her face. "You suffered a serious accident," she explained gently. "But it's okay now. You're in the hospital, and we're going to take good care of you." As she spoke, I felt a comforting presence by my side. I couldn't see anything with my physical eyes, but I knew, deep in my being, that I was not alone. The loving presences I encountered on the other side were still with me, giving me strength to face what lay ahead. The doctors continued to work around me, checking my vital signs and adjusting equipment. I heard fragments of their conversations about my heart having stopped for several minutes and how it was incredible that I hadn't suffered brain damage. I closed my eyes again, exhausted but deeply grateful. I had returned. I had a second chance, and I knew that nothing would be the same as before. The days following my return were a mix of physical challenges and deep emotional revelations. Recovery was difficult. My body had undergone significant trauma and would take time to fully heal. But every day I felt stronger, not just physically, but spiritually. The doctors were surprised by the speed of my recovery. What should have been a long period of hospitalization turned into just a few weeks. They couldn't explain how the injury to my head, which initially seemed so severe, was healing in an almost miraculous way. But I knew I was not alone on this healing journey. I constantly felt the loving presence I experienced on the other side giving me strength, helping me to face each obstacle. As I grew stronger, I began to deeply ponder all the experiences I had gone through. Every sunrise was a gift, a new chance to live with gratitude and purpose. The concerns that once consumed me, like professional success, social status, and the accumulation of material goods, now seemed so trivial. I understood that the love and support of family are truly irreplaceable. My mother, Isabel, came from Puerto Rico as soon as she heard about the accident. Seeing her by my side, caring for me with such affection, made me realize how much I had neglected our relationship in recent years. I promised myself that this would change. My son, Miguel, was also present throughout my recovery. Seeing the fear and relief in his eyes made me understand how much he needed me, not just as a provider, but as a father, friend, and guide. I vowed to be more present in his life, offering all the love I rediscovered within myself. The experience also completely transformed my view of God and spirituality. The God I met was not the distant and punitive being I was taught to fear, but an inexhaustible source of love and acceptance. This new understanding brought me a peace I had never experienced before. I began to reconnect with my spirituality in a different way, not through empty rituals or rigid dogmas, but through a direct and personal connection with the divine. Meditation, prayer, and acts of kindness became an integral part of my daily life. As I shared my experience with friends and family, I realized that not everyone understood or believed what I'd lived through. Some thought it was the result of trauma, others that I was confused due to medication. But that didn't bother me. I knew the truth in my heart, and that was what mattered. I decided to use my second chance to make a difference in people's lives. I started volunteering at a local hospital, offering comfort and hope to terminally ill patients. I shared with them what I'd learned about life after death and the unconditional love that awaits us on the other side. I also changed my approach at work. Instead of seeking only profit and personal success, I began to look for ways to use my knowledge and skills to benefit the community. I initiated social responsibility projects in the company, encouraging my colleagues to get involved in important causes. Every challenge I face now, I face with the certainty that I am not alone. I know there is a greater force guiding and protecting me. And I know that, regardless of what the future holds, the love I experienced on that journey beyond this world will always be with me, leading me down the right path. My near-death experience was not just a turning point in my life, but a revelation that love and acceptance are the true pillars of existence. Now, I see the world with new eyes, valuing every moment and every connection. And it is this message of unconditional love that I want to share with everyone who crosses my path. This is my story, a story of death and rebirth, of fear transformed into love, of doubt transformed into faith. And my hope is that, in some way, it can touch your heart and inspire you to live each day with more love, gratitude, and purpose.